Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started, and I imagine that we will have time for questions at the end. So we are very fortunate that we have somebody on our board who has been dealing with digital exhibits, which is something that's really, new. We didn't think of having our exhibits digital before. It was like, of course, people want to come in, they want to see the real thing. So, this unusual time causes us to think about things a little bit differently. And White River Valley has not only thought about things a little bit differently, they've actually taken action against that. So we're really pleased that Hilary is here today and is going to share what she's learned and how things are going with the digital exhibit. So thank you very much, Hilary.
Thanks, Alice. Good afternoon, everyone. I've met most of you, but if you're not familiar, I'm Hilary Pittenger. I serve on the ACTRO board, and I am the curator of collections at the White River Valley Museum in Auburn. We are a small institution. We have, well, I mean, who knows how to count staff right now, but before everything, we had 6 staff. And we usually do a couple of exhibits in our physical building a year. And this year was no different in terms of our plans. We had decided that we were going to participate in the women's suffrage centennial. And so we had been putting together an exhibit, and then all of a sudden we needed to make it digital or do something different to make it accessible. And luckily, being a small museum, one of the best parts of that is we are able to be pretty agile, and we can take a lot of risks and just try things and see what happens. And that's what we did. So I'm going to talk about the specific digital tools that we used in creating the exhibit. And then I'm also going to talk about digital tools that we use. It's going to be focused on preserving and sharing your collections. So this could be exhibits. It could just be all kinds of technologies that are available for making your collections more accessible. We'll talk a little bit about collections databases. We'll talk about online archives, all kinds of stuff with a focus on what they can do for your collections. And then there'll be time for questions and some discussion at the end. So I'm going to share my screen back and forth, so you won't have to look at my face the whole time. So let's just start off with checking out what the exhibit looks like. So this is our website. It's right on the front page of our website there. This is hashtag squad goals is the name of our exhibit. And we decided to host this. We use a Squarespace website. And we decided we were going to make it right there, not try and use another third-party app or anything. And the basic gist of the exhibit is it is broken into subject matter sections. So we have an introduction, we have a bit here on fashion, on the temperance movement, etc. And then a variety of objects that you can navigate through using the slider on the right. And then each of these links to an additional page. Here's an example of one of the pages that it links to, with a fuller version of the image and a caption and a link to a source if that's applicable. The tools that we used for all of this were very simple and not that exciting, and you probably already have access to a lot of them. All of our graphic design was done using Microsoft Paint and PowerPoint. We don't have Photoshop, we don't have InDesign, we don't have access to a lot of that stuff, just because we can't pay for those subscriptions. And we don't have a dedicated designer on staff, as I'm sure most small museums don't. So we used what we had. PowerPoint is fantastic for doing any sort of image editing. It's very easy to use. If you use any other Microsoft products, it has a lot of the same commands in terms of image formatting. You can make, in the example of the image that's on screen right now, You can make that gradient very easily. Just tell it, oh, I want to go from orange to blue. And it can just do that for you. We didn't have to be a fancy artist to make that color gradient in the background. It can make shapes, it can make borders, it can make transparent layers. All that stuff is very easy and doesn't require a whole bunch of design knowledge or software knowledge to utilize. As far as object images, we did use a number of objects from our collection for this. Oh, here's another example of Mr. Frederick Douglass. Again, really simple, use the gradient background, put some text over the top. We used a lot of memes and meme text throughout the exhibit. So obviously this is not a direct quote from Frederick Douglass. It's been slightly modified. But you know, we had fun with it. Here's an example of a physical artifact. And again, we didn't have a fancy camera or fancy photo editing software. This is literally just taken with your phone camera. I believe an iPhone was used for this one. I am an Android user myself, but you've probably realized if you use a relatively modern smartphone that the cameras are probably better than most other cameras that you might have had access to in your institution. Any sort of point and click digital is not going to be as good as what you can get on your phone. So don't be afraid to just use that phone camera. It'll autofocus, you can put filters on it, you can do a lot of photo editing right on your phone to get the look that you're going for. And then when we wanted to put a background in the back of it, we just used the tools in Microsoft Paint to just cut out around the image. We didn't even use any of the fancy Photoshop, make the background transparent, blah, blah, blah. We didn't have that. There we go. Drop a gradient in the back in PowerPoint, and you now have a lovely image of one of your artifacts. You don't even have to go that crazy. We started out with just a solid color sheet in the background to make the backgrounds of all of our images the same. And that would work perfectly good. We decided we wanted to go a different direction when we saw all the items together, but you don't have to have a whole bunch of equipment. You don't need a green screen. You don't need anything like that in order to get some good quality images of objects, whether they're big or small. We have a bicycle in here. We have a kitchen cabinet all the way down to, what's one of the smaller things? We have a shot glass with a lot of detail on it. One thing we did have a problem with was hat pins. We tried to do a hat pin and it was really hard to cut around that tiny little hat pin point. So we wound up going with something different for that. But the majority of things, this was going to work just fine. As far as the actual website, I mentioned that we have a Squarespace website. That's what it's built on. We didn't have to get any additional apps or widgets or anything. We just used the tools that already existed in that drag and drop style web page. So if you've used Squarespace, then you are familiar with what I'm talking about. Wix websites also do something similar. So do Google sites, if you've used a Google site, where instead of knowing a whole lot of code, you're able to just drag and drop a photo element or a title element or a text element kind of where you want it on the screen. And so you don't have to know a bunch of CSS in order to make it work. Yeah, and that's kind of the structure and what we did to make it look the way that it does. As far as the content, one thing that we realized, this is well before the pandemic set in, was that our collection doesn't have a huge amount of stuff related to women's suffrage, and we were going to need to supplement it with some, photographs and archival materials from other institutions. Luckily, there are a huge number of free digital archives or partially free digital archives that you have access to, that you can use for your exhibits, that you can use for digital programming, for creating teacher resources, for anything that you might want to do to better share and contextualize the collection that you already have. I'll turn off my screen share here just a minute. So a few of those that are available, and I will send out at the end of this, we have, actually, I'll just post it right now. We have a document here that I've just put in the chat that is links to all of the resources that I'm going to be talking about. So you can look at them now if you want, or you can save that document for later to peruse. But some of the free archives that we utilized in our exhibit were Internet Archive for books, the Library of Congress website. Almost everything that is posted by the Library of Congress is public domain or otherwise zero copyright or Creative Commons, some sort of accessible option for utilizing their materials. Smithsonian Institute has an open access program. Especially important is that almost all of the images from the National Portrait Gallery and also the African American History Museum, National African American History Museum, are included in that open access. So for instance, that's where we were able to get the image of Frederick Douglass there. That comes from the National African American Museum. And so you can use those resources, you can edit them, you can remix them, do whatever you want to do with them, but a lot of them are completely open access. And you can see if you go through our exhibit, you know, on our little credit line, we linked back to the catalog page for each of those objects. And so folks can find more information about them if they want, or if you just want to see kind of what that looks like in those repositories at the Library of Congress or wherever, you can go there. A couple other great resources that we didn't use much for this exhibit, but that you might be interested in, are the Commons on Flickr, which is a whole collection from a lot of different institutions, libraries, museums, archives, etc., of free open access or at least Creative Commons accessible images. So if you just Google the Commons, it pops up. My favorite sub-collection in that is actually from the British Library. They posted a ton of images of all kinds of book art. So if you want something that kind of looks like Victorian, or you just need some good clip art of, you know, a decorative flower flourish, or an old picture of the moon in sort of a Victorian engraving style, or anything like that, you can use those. They're free. They're available for any kind of use that you might want. I use them all the time when just making signage or backgrounds for PowerPoints, all kinds of stuff. So that comes in really handy when you're just looking for decorative elements. Also, the Met Museum has an open access program, so you can utilize a lot of artwork from their collection. This exhibit didn't wind up focusing a lot on artwork, but obviously we know the importance of the interaction between art and history, and sometimes a piece of art is going to be a much better educator than a 3D artifact or even a photograph. So check out what is in the Met's open access collection. There's a link to that in that Google Doc too. And there's more being added every day. Lots of libraries and museums are finding that it serves their mission much better to make things as accessible as possible. So you never know who's going to announce a new project. So keep an eye out on those AAM emails. But this is a truly massive amount of material already, especially the Library of Congress. I can't say how much that helped us with this exhibit. So these are great ways to help support your collection and expand, maybe if you are going to do a digital exhibit. This helps expand the material and the stories that you can share with maybe the artifacts that you already have. On top of that, on top of just our exhibit page as it exists, we really were leaning into the social media aesthetic. So you can probably see, I'm going to start sharing my screen here again. share, there we go. You can see here at the top of the page, we have some links to an Instagram account and a Pinterest page that we made to go along with this exhibit. And a lot of them are going to be overlapping content or just different ways to deliver the content. And I really want to encourage everyone to not be scared of using their museum's social media as a way to share your collections. Even if you don't have a website at all, you can have a Facebook page and you can post a picture of that cool historic photograph of the schoolhouse in town from 1905. And that's it. You just shared some of your collection. You didn't have to set up a database. You didn't have to do anything crazy. You just made something accessible in a way that it previously hadn't been. So I'm going to show you a few examples of different museums using their social media sites in particular ways to hopefully give you some inspiration of how you can share your collections using all of these different platforms that are available to us. So I'm going to start out here. This is the White River Valley Museum Facebook page. You can see right here at the top, we're able to post one of our images from the exhibit and get multiple uses out of those images that we've created. We also sometimes can just post a straight image from our online database or maybe something that just got donated. Let me find, here's one of a 3D object here. You know, a small caption, a little bit, say, hey, this is a 1905 mountain climbing outfit. Here's the image of it. It doesn't even have to link anywhere. You have just helped share your collection. So this is obviously multi-use for us. We don't just use it for collection sharing. But this is a really easy way for people to immediately share with their friends what's going on. If they see something that really sparks interest for them, they'll be able to share it out and use it in their real lives, as opposed to them having to go through a bunch of hoops in order to access something through maybe your website or through a third-party website. This just reaches people where they are. Instagram is another great option, especially if you want to be sharing a lot of images. The Wing Luke Museum has a great Instagram page where you can see them sharing art and objects. Here's a sign from their collection, images of new things in their gift shop. Again, it's not just collections, but Instagram is a super image-focused platform. So if that's what you want to do and that's what you want to be focused on, Instagram can be a great place to do that. And you can also use a lot of hashtags to help get in front of different audiences that you might not ever see. Pinterest is always an option. The Met has a fantastic Pinterest page. If you've never explored their costume collection through Pinterest, I highly, highly recommend it. They've posted a lot of beautiful images of especially women's clothing in their collection. But you can see they've made all these different pin boards that are not super serious. You know, they have kind of silly names that rhyme or jokes. Maybe they just cover a certain type of content like sports or animals. I think they have one that's just about cats on here somewhere. Here's one about sort of cosmic imagery, things that are glittery. It's just another way to explore a collection, very low impact. It doesn't cost any money to set up any of these social media accounts. It certainly doesn't cost anything to set up a Pinterest board. And it's a way to get your art and your artifacts being shared. So you can organize it any way that you would want. And then also you can link back to your Pinterest page if you post something there from a Twitter or a Facebook or your website. So it's another place to host some of these images. I am personally a big Twitter user, so I follow a lot of museums on Twitter. And if you don't follow the Museum of English Rural Life, I strongly recommend it. Here is them sharing a photo from their collection of 4 sheepdog in the back of a car or parallel barking. And that's the kind of comedy, and they have fun with the things that they're posting, and they're pretty silly. A lot of their images are about, you know, agricultural history, animal husbandry, and that can get a little repetitive. How many prize cow images are you going to have in a collection that you're going to be able to keep contextualizing? But they're able to do it by inserting some of that humor and being a little silly. But they still have those connections back to their collection. If someone stumbles across this and says, hey, this is perfect, I want to print this in my book, or I'm a scholar, I want to use this in a lecture, people can still get access to that information about where to find this, what repository to talk to, even though it's on something like Twitter that is extremely public facing, and not specifically built for sharing collections. One other Twitter feed that I would strongly recommend checking out is the City of Kent, if you haven't heard about them. They've been making some waves lately because they decided to take a new social media tact, and they're being pretty silly. And it's wonderful. As someone who grew up on the East Hill of Kent, I really am thrilled that they say they are home of the McChevron in their bio here. I know exactly that McChevron. It's delightful. But you know, it doesn't have to be serious just because we're talking about history. Just because sometimes we're talking about heavy topics doesn't mean that our entire online persona needs to be serious 100% of the time. We, as museums, as people who are sharing history and sharing collections, you know, it's fine to throw a little bit of humor in there and help people remember why they're proud of being in this community, and help develop a little bit of that you know, sense of true community within your area of service. We are a part of these communities. We aren't just observers of them. So, you know, make sure to have some jokes that the locals will get, have some jokes that people will appreciate, and throw a little bit of personality into what you're doing, even if it is just sharing some historical photos or a new collection that came in. So that's a lot of that sharing. I'm gonna switch over now to talking a little bit about collections databases. Our collections database is Past Perfect. We have a little button on our website that will go right there. And we use Past Perfect Online to share information from our catalog online. Those of you who have talked to me about this know I'm a big fan of Past Perfect, but a lot of that is because Past Perfect fits the needs of our institution. There's a lot of great museum cataloging systems, collections management systems that exist out there. They are not all tens of thousands of dollars anymore. There's a lot of them that have built-in web-facing elements to help you share your collection even more effectively. And I would encourage you to check all of those out. In fact, one of the links in that document that I dropped in the chat is to an AASLH technical leaflet number 286 that is all about a list of every available collections management system, with a list of sort of pros and cons, what it does well, what features they have, so you can kind of browse through that to get an idea for what other options there are and how they might fit the needs that you're looking for, if you don't already have one. As far as our Past Perfect website and making it work for us and making it work better for us, one of the things that happened when we got Past Perfect online was it had this default page that kind of had some tips on how to search using it. And if you went and looked at other institutions' Past Perfect pages, you saw that pretty much 90% of them all use that same default page because no one was going and customizing it. So I went and found out how to customize it. And it takes just a little bit of coding knowledge, not too much, just a little bit of HTML. And I can show you what our back end looks like to add these buttons that you see on the bottom with the images. It's nothing too crazy if it'll display. Oop, not into it right now. Anyway, it's just a little bit of coding that is required to fix fix any of those images where you want them to go. I learned how to make a table in HTML. It is something you can look up on, oops, that's the wrong one. It's something you can look up on YouTube. It's something, there's a lot of really easy tutorials. It took me probably about 30 minutes of learning and maybe another 30 minutes of doing one day when I had just decided to sit down and dedicate myself to learning how to do that. And there we go. In fact, Past Perfect Online doesn't let you do a lot of things that are too crazy in terms of coding and customization. So you can't get too carried away with it, thank goodness, for people like me who don't fully know what they're doing. I would also recommend that you check out what other Past Perfect Online users or other users of whatever platform that you're using are doing with their online facing collections, because I got a lot of inspiration of just finding out what Past Perfect Online was capable of doing. What can my tools do that maybe someone more advanced than me is capable of doing? One of the links in that document is to the Past Perfect Online list of all their organizations that are using them, and they have a nice list of links to every organization in the world that currently has a Past Perfect Online site directly to their front page, like this, the front page of their catalog. So you can see, oh, hey, that person was able to rearrange the links on the top of the page, or that person was able to put in a cool background. I didn't know I could do that. I'm gonna go find where the background feature is in Past Perfect Online. You know, it didn't take reading the entire 300-page manual or whatever it was to figure out that there were some things that I could do, and then just do a Google search to figure out, hey, how can I do this? And then someone much smarter than me was able to very nicely inform me of how to do it. So I strongly recommend looking for that inspiration. If you're not quite sure what direction you might want to go with any sort of online collections. If you don't have a collections database, much less an online-facing collections database of any kind, don't forget that Excel is your friend, or Google Sheets if you don't have Microsoft Word products. An Excel chart is basic, but if you can just be getting an ID number and a name and a brief description of objects that are coming in, that is already ahead of the game. That's a start. And it's always better to start with a little something. And then when people either come in person someday, when we're back to being in person, or when someone emails you, you can say, hey, do we have a photo of someone from this particular family? Having that, even just an Excel chart, will enable you to make your collection so much more accessible than just having to rely on someone's memory or going through pages in a binder or other paper systems. And you can always transfer information from an Excel chart into a database later when that becomes something that is an option for your institution. So never underestimate those simple tools that you already have. So that is a lot of my online tools here. A few other great tools that we didn't use on our website, but that I use for different collections projects. Don't forget Microsoft Word or Google Docs, whichever one works best for you. I actually use Microsoft Word for formatting exhibit labels all the time because I'm never quite sure what size they're gonna print out at, and I'm not good at figuring out all that stuff. So I can just set the paper size of what I have available in my printer on Microsoft Word and then drop the images in on a new sheet, and then I'll know exactly what size they're gonna print out at and what they're gonna look like on a page. And Again, I am not a design professional here. So that works really well for me in visualizing what I need. And Microsoft Word even has a lot of simple image editing, image recoloring options. Oh, my cat's chiming. A lot of different options for what you can do. We make all of our exhibit labels in-house at White River. They get printed off on our regular boring printer with regular boring ink on regular boring paper, and then just put on foam core. Glue is great. So it's nothing too exciting, and most of them are done on Word. So make sure and use those resources. If you want lessons on how to use Word or PowerPoint or any of these products, there's a lot of lessons available online, which are super awesome. I would recommend, if you have either an SPL or a KCLS library card, going and checking out the online library options. It may be under databases, it depends on the library's website. But there's things like lynda.com or Access Online, and these are huge video repositories of really professionally made, nice looking instructional videos on all kinds of skills, but with a special focus on digital skills. So these could be, there's a lesson on lynda.com that is how to look at a Facebook page. If you're not familiar with Facebook and you don't even know what any of that stuff meant, it'll teach you what all those different elements mean and where to start. If you want basic HTML, there's a class for that. If you want to learn how to do image editing in PowerPoint, there's a class for that. And they're all free with your library card, so take advantage of it. So definitely always use those products you already have bought or have come for free on your computers. Google Slides is a really interesting product. This is one of the Google Doc things. It's the same as PowerPoint, or it's analogous to PowerPoint. And one really cool thing about any of these Google products is that they're all shareable. So just like the Google Doc that I linked in the chat, I can make something and then share it with whoever using the link. And you can do the same thing with Google Slides. I have seen a lot of activists in the past couple months using Google Slides when they wanted to share information about upcoming marches or a series of links that they wanted to direct people towards, maybe for fundraisers. You could use it in your museums for sharing programs if you're not ready to make a whole full-fledged digital exhibit, but maybe you have a series of 10 images of the construction of a local landmark and a little bit of text context to go with them. You could make a Google Slides presentation and then share it on your website or on your Facebook page. And then you've just shared 10 whole images with context in the order that you wanted them in a way that the public can access. And I mean, the possibilities are endless. If you look up different ways that people have used Google Slides for different programs or sharing information or school alumni reunions, or all sorts of things pop up. So look for that inspiration, and consider if you have a project that you've been wanting to share with folks, and that they can peruse at their own leisure. Google Sites is another Google product. If you have a more advanced project than would fit onto a PowerPoint slide, you might consider setting up a special Google site utilizing it. Google Sites is free for educators. So especially if you're using it for an educational purpose, or you are partnering with a school or another educational nonprofit, you might see if they already have an account set up. It's another option. Google Sites is also drag and drop like Squarespace or Wix, so super easy to use. Audacity. If you need to do any audio recording, especially of oral histories, in this trying time where we are all socially distanced from each other, Audacity is free audio recording software. I have a link to their homepage, and it's developed by volunteers too. So yay, volunteerism, support volunteers. It is another thing, you're probably going to want to go find a good YouTube tutorial video of how to use it if you've never used any audio editing software before. But it's a great way to record some basic audio and do some basic editing in order to get some of those oral histories preserved. It doesn't take a lot of complicated equipment. You can just use what you have available. And similarly, Lightworks is a simple video editing software that is also free. You get it for 7 days on a trial, and then after that, if you just register your email, you keep using it for free. You just have to register your email. This is a great video editing software. I actually used it, I don't know, a couple months ago now. We made a series of Animal Crossing videos where we talked about the museum and Animal Crossing and used it to talk about museums in general and what museum work is. And we used Lightworks to be our video editor because we didn't have access to a video editor from anywhere but our houses. So that worked out really well. And I can say from experience, it was actually a lot of fun to learn how to use that. And then one last digital resource for sharing your collections before we get into some question time is the History Link People's Histories. I'm sure you're all familiar with History Link, but they have a service where if you have already written articles, say by your own local historians, or maybe an essay that was written by a prominent person from your community, they will post those under their People's History project. And so it'll have a little paragraph next to it. I put a link in that document to an example of one, and you can see the little paragraph they have next to it explaining what a people's history is. And they will just post it as it is. There's a really great one from Inez Denny. It's called Dreams of a Devotee of Fashion. And it's an article of her basically complaining about corsets and a lot of fashions from the turn of the century. And it's a great way to get some of those primary resources up and online in a place where people from around the world can utilize it, where it can be easily searched just like the rest of History Link's content. It can be cited, all this other good stuff. We've been working with History Link on getting some of our old newsletter articles posted. They aren't being done as people's histories, but we might be using that tool in the future for other articles that are written by historians in our community. So if you don't have your own website, if you don't think you're going to get a lot of traffic on the website that you do have for a really interesting historical document, that might be the way to go to get as many eyes as possible on this piece that you have. So in summary, before we have questions, I just really want to encourage everyone to think that doing anything is better than doing nothing. Even if it's something small, even if it's not a full-fledged, oh, we're going to be able to get our whole collection online using X method. If you can share a little bit of what you have, that's better than waiting until something is perfect, right? The perfect is always the enemy of the good. If you can share 10 photos on your Facebook page versus sharing 0 photos on your nothing page that doesn't exist, share those 10 photos. Do that part. That will be better. That'll be good. And in the future, when you have access to funding or special, people with special skills who can help with some of those other elements that you maybe want to work towards but don't have yet, that's fine. None of this stuff is going to get in the way of doing that work later or allowing you to work towards that. Just don't hamstring the ability of your collection to be useful out of fear or out of worry that, oh, people aren't going to use it the right way. Maybe we'll lose control in terms of copyright or something. It's always good to be aware of copyright issues, but for the most part, sharing an image on Twitter or Facebook, you're not going to lose a lot of control. And if that thing just can't be seen in any other way versus being seen a little bit in a way where, oh, some people might be able to take this and repost it on their own page, you have to balance the scales on that. Would you rather it not be used at all, or that maybe you wouldn't be able to profit from using it? I know where I land on that, but you have to make your own judgment for your institution on where you land on that. And I would say for the majority of small museums, we're not going to make a huge profit off of monetizing our collections. It's just not going to happen. So that makes that decision pretty easy for me, on just getting stuff in front of people and being a good participant in my community that way, giving people as much access as I possibly can. So that's kind of what drives me to try experimentation with all these different methods. And, be creative. Like I said, we're small museums, we're agile. We can take risks. We can do a small project that might be a little bit weird for us or out of our comfort zone. And if it doesn't work, oh well, 20 people saw it and half of those people were our family members. We'll try something else next week. We have a lot of options. We aren't beholden to powers that be that are devoting hundreds of thousands of dollars into an exhibit like the Louvre or something. So be creative, be experimental, just try playing with things and have a good time at it, and you will probably find some ways that work for your institution, at least in the short term. So with that, if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to unmute and say it to everyone or type it in the chat box. Or if you have any great digital engagement projects that have utilized your collections or a tool that you've used to really help share your collections, feel free to share it with the group. Nobody. Uh-oh. Well, we all have some experimenting to do, that's for sure.
Hi. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't have a question. I was just going to have a comment. So,
okay. I haven't done any active stuff in a long time, so it's really fun to do this, participate again. I'm glad you're doing the webinar thing. Hilary, I'm just curious if you have used anything like Clio or any kind of app like that in a way that's been useful. I saw ASLH was like doing a webinar on that recently.
I have not personally used Clio. I know other institutions have experimented with it. Actually, the ASLH, and I think we had a link to this in our Heritage Advisor, which is on our website. Their ASLH just put out a webinar that is free to view about using Clio in a specific project. So if that's something that you're interested, I would definitely check out that webinar, because there will be folks with more experience than me who will be able to tell you about it.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that it might be really good for some organizations, just another way to get your content out there. And I did see that on the newsletter. So yeah, hopefully people will take advantage of it.
Yeah, definitely look into that. There are all sorts of exhibit plugins. Omeka is a big one that we've actually been playing with at ACTRO. We are hoping to launch our online exhibit utilizing a variety of King County collections, including some from organizations that are here if they are interested, to show an example of what putting objects in an online exhibit can look like and what it's like to get your artifacts online. And we have been experimenting with Omeka for that. So hopefully when everything is said and done, we'll be able to share some best practices for what we found with that particular tool.
So I think there's, like, as Hilary mentioned, just a couple of points that we all want to share our collection, and we can't do it the way we normally do right now. But it's also a way to stay engaged with your members, or, you know, with the community in general, that, you know, you're posting things, and, you know, maybe you'll get some people that, you know, hadn't been part of your family before. Family mean museum family, because they're gonna, you know, they're younger, they tend to communicate digitally. So, you know, that may be a way to bring in that particular part of the community. There's a lot of advantages for thinking about, you know, what can you do to stay engaged when the doors are shut? And this is just one, you know, one way to do that. And, you know, starting small with one photo is a way to start. So don't make it seem like it has to be a big project. And, you know, what I think we'd like to do is, you know when you do that, let's share it with people, and you can share your successes, and we can see, you know, what's happening with each other, and you'll learn other tips to share with people. And then together as a community, we can just grow stronger.
Absolutely. I can't tell you, as the person who fields all of our research requests at the museum, there are so many times when someone has seen an image of ours, whether it's from our own social media or that they found, you know, 3 iterations away. You know, in 1985, someone ordered a copy of a photo, and then their grandpa scanned it and sent it to all the grandkids, and, you know, all these rigmarole of how it got to someone. But it got there, and then they contact us about it because they want to know more, or they're researching something about that topic. And it was just by the grace of whatever happenstance that they were able to find that, or they're able to Google it and it pops up on someone's Twitter feed somewhere. And they say, hey, can I get a copy of this photo? And maybe they never even found our website, but they were able to somehow find our email and send it to the museum. So the more places you're able to share things, the more people are going to be able to find it. And it might feel kind of chaotic on the back end to you looking at all of these places, but to the end user, they're only seeing it this one time, if at all. It's not chaotic looking to the person viewing it. So try and keep that in mind, that even if it's a little bit, you know, crazy for you to keep track of and keep notes on all these things, that the end result is sharing our collection as widely as possible. So take advantage of what you can do in that regard. Any other questions or cool programs that you have seen lately? Or just shout outs if you have any of your collection that you've digitized or made accessible recently, let us know.
I just sent a chat message, but I don't know if it got through. My question was whether or not there's any information about 3D printing for small objects.
The best local 3D printing experts were the Living Computer Museum, is where I would have sent you, who recently have closed, and hopefully they'll reopen, but we don't know. Gosh, they would have been the ones that I would send you to. Alice or Virginia, do you know of any other folks that are doing a lot of 3D printing work?
Erin's on the call too, so maybe.
Erin, yes. Kim says Museum of Flight is a good resource.
I would check in with local maker spaces. We tend to stick within museums, but there's a lot of times where if you're able to work with creative people who are outside of museums, they might teach you some tricks that are new. So I would reach out to a local maker space. If you're interested in, I do have contact information for, I'm going to put in my email address, and if you want to reach out to me, I will dig up the contact information for someone I know who is a fantastic 3D printer expert who can do design files and all the rest of the kind of stuff. So if that's all
Thank
right.
you.
I also know a part of Smithsonian's open access program is they also have 3D models of things that they have done 3D scans of available through open access. So if you're looking for ideas of things to print or just things to experiment with before you go whole hog into a project, you might see what they have available. Any other questions? Don't be shy. We had a question about the access to recorded videos, and they will be posted to the Actio Facebook page. So if you want to share this talk or some of our previous talks with your coworkers, feel free to find the link on our Facebook page. All right, well, if there's no other specific questions, I'll hang around for a couple more minutes if you think of anything, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today, and let us know if you have specific topics that you're interested in Actio tackling for you or providing an opportunity to share cool projects that you have been working on. So have a great afternoon.
Yeah. And thank you, Hilary, for showing us, not just telling us, but showing us what you've done. I think it, at least for me, it helps a lot to see, you know, what's been done. So thank you for that and putting together the list of resources. And hopefully we'll be sharing with each other what we've done soon.
I'm looking forward to seeing all your projects, following all your Twitter accounts.